Well, what I was surprised at, I think now that after talking to you that it was being in the room with 5 people. One of them was someone I was dating.
There you go. And you're not sure that you wanted to see in that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I know I didn't. But the funny thing is the difference is I had done such intense work, and even really light state, I was thinking, what would I do in such a deeper state? It would be wonderful. Seems like it would be incredibly healing, and just so much easier to work through stuff.
It is.
And of course, I'm talking about past. That's what I did, past history stuff.
I did a little bit, when I went to do the training. When you're in training to do hypnotherapy, it's really interesting because in order to learn a technique, you have to see it demonstrated. And so the instructor would demonstrate a regression technique, and she did on me, this one particular class. And so she said, basically, pick a problem, pick something that you like to solve. And for me at the time, it was like I used to have this really bad temper, the hot, red-haired Irish temper thing. People that meet me now go, oh, my God, no way, because I typically look pretty relaxed. But,
wow.
At the time, that was a thing that I still hadn't really resolved. And she took me back, and I remember, she had me imagining that I was much younger. I was a child. I was 5 years old. I was 2 years old. And basically, I was having this experience where my dad was blowing up and angry at me, and I was having a temper tantrum, something like that. And what you do is you step outside of it, you look at it from a third-person perspective, and you see it as what it is. And once you see it as what it is, it ceases to be an identity, a part of you that is something that you identify with. And it's just an experience that you had, a learning experience. And since then, I can honestly say, I've had complete control of what used to be outside of my control. So it was useful in that context.
Were you sobbing?
No, I wasn't sobbing at all. I don't know if I had a little tear, but the other students in the room were crying a little bit, and
they were?
Yeah, they get really into it because they, when people identify with, especially when you go back and you have an experience and you're a child, because especially if you're a man and you have an experience where you're a child, you're very, very vulnerable, and all the women that were in the class, because I think there was me and one other guy and everyone else was a woman in the class, and they see you as being very vulnerable, so they want to hug you afterwards, and they want to, oh, that was so beautiful, and such a and so it was kind of an emotional experience for me, but yeah, it wasn't like this big, sobbing Dr. Phil kind of a thing. No, not at all.
That's so funny. So, how long is hypnotherapy training?
It was 250 hours. Now, here's the thing. What I did was...
I'm not good with math. How many days, months, years?
Well, it was over the course of 3 months. It was 12 hours a day on Saturday, 12 hours a day on Sunday, and 3 hours on Friday night, like every weekend for a few months. It was a lot. And I went, and after I did this, because I went to college, and I wanted to look and see, well, how much time did I spend on my major in college? And I'm like, well, 3 to 6 credits for 4 years. I added up the amount of time that I spent in class, and I was like, I actually spent more time in hypnotherapy training than I did studying broadcast journalism when I was in college. Because it's only like when you go to college, only a certain small percentage of it is actually spent learning stuff that you're going to use,
exactly.
when you graduate. So yeah, it was intensive.
Well, we are coming to the end of the first half of our show, and if you just tuned in, you're listening to Sean Wheeler, and he has a practice called Pure Hypnosis, and he is a clinical hypnotherapist specializing especially in fears, phobias, stopping smoking, and losing weight, and I've been getting thinner as we're talking.
I've noticed that.
So he's also a lot of fun and has done stand-up comedy and improv. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with Sean.
98.5 FM.
WSBFM Atlanta. And worldwide at
B98.5.com.
Hey, welcome back. Well, today we are talking to Sean Wheeler again for the second half of our show. Again, he has a practice called Pure Hypnosis, and he also, the reason I invited him is because he used to do a lot of comedy, so I thought he'd be interesting. Therapeutically, he has very, very different beliefs than myself, but what I like about him is that he will eliminate behaviors, which would go perfectly with some of my clients. I could send them to you to eliminate a behavior, but you wouldn't try to get into their past history, which I appreciate. So we're talking about different things that you've worked with and different types of issues. What about fears and phobias? You said something about a cat.
Yeah, when I was first going through training, I was reading outside of class on my own. And I will give all the credit to the guys who founded NLP, who are Richard Bandler and John Grinder. I was reading a book called Transformations and another one called Frogs into Princes. And I was reading these books, and they're making all these claims about these things that they're describing working so beautifully and so quickly, and they were so easy. And I was sitting there thinking, well, I'd like to see that myself. And I was on lunch one day, at lunch, with a classmate of mine in the class, in the training, and I mentioned my cats, and I had 2 little kittens at the time. And she said, her eyes bugged out. She's like, oh, God, cats, no, I can't be near cats. Cats just freak me out. And I said, really? Come to find out that she'd had this paralyzing phobia of cats for over 30 years, this woman in her 50s, to the extent that she couldn't even go into a house if there was a cat there. Like, this was something that had affected her life. And so I said, hey, well, why don't you come over and work for class credit one day, and I'll try some techniques that I've learned on phobias with you. And she kind of begrudgingly, I think, to placate me, said okay, and she decided to come over. And she insisted that before she did, that I would lock them in cages and put them in a separate room, okay, which I did. So I locked them in their little carriers, put them in a separate room. She came over, and for about 2 hours, I basically threw everything in the book that I had learned at her. All these different NLP techniques combined with some of the hypnotherapy techniques that we had learned in class. Long story short, at the end of it, I wake her up. I say, hey, would you like to go next door and meet my cats? And she thought about it literally for about 2 seconds, and without hesitating, she said, okay. We walked into the next room, opened the sliding glass door, let them out of their cages, and she held them. And she cried. And I'm telling you, she was hugging me, she was holding these cats, she's sobbing, she's crying, she's saying this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. I was like, we went to class right after that. Okay, and here's the funny part, because it was like, that was a Friday, and I worked with her at like 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, we were driving downtown to class. And before we drove to class, I went upstairs and I changed my clothes or something. I was in front of the mirror, and I did like this big fist pump. I was like, yeah, it's like I won a ball game. Because in that moment, I realized that this stuff actually worked. Now, I knew that hypnosis had worked with me, but here's a clear-cut example where you can see that it worked. Like, she's holding the cats. It's over. It's done. And that was the convincer to me.
That is so wild. Are you familiar with the tapping therapy?
Yeah, the EFT.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, my initial inclination is that I think it may work. I'm just not that interested in it because it seems to reinforce something that's conscious, right? So when a person is using EFT techniques, they're taught to tap on the forehead, tap on a different area of the body, which is a conscious behavior that you have to remind yourself to do. And when I work with people, what I want them to do is I want them to make a change and then not have to think about it anymore.
Well, the only reason I said it is because when I was first introduced to it, the person that, the reason they fell in love with it is they had a similar experience, but it was a one-time tapping experience with a fear of water.
Right.
Or something like that. I can't remember if it was water or an animal, but it was 100% reversal. Mm-hmm. But they never had to tap again. So that's what I was.
Yeah, some of the EFT that I've been exposed to is like, it just seemed a little bit too intricate and complicated when I was first learning it.
I know.
And so what I learned when I learned these NLP techniques, so like, this is simple. This makes sense, and it works quickly, and I've already done it. So I kind of just stayed away from EFT myself. Not that it doesn't work, just that it's not really my preferred thing.
Yeah, mine either. I mean, I'll do a little bit of it, and I've had it work. I think I've probably had it work 1 out of 10 times, or sometimes 2 out of 10. It just depends on the issue, but it's the same thing. It's just not my thing, and the people that do it are great with it, but they do get to extremely intricate, complicated tapping sequences that, it works, but it's just not for me either.
Yeah.
So, have you had other phobias that were cured that quickly and easily? I mean, 2 hours isn't easy. But
yeah, no, I mean, quicker than that, actually. I mean, if you read those books, they call it the 10-minute phobia cure, and you can do it in 10 minutes, the meat of it, and I've worked on people with fear of flying and had several examples
10
of
minutes?
where they, like literally, because you're talking about a visualization exercise, and which is that, the best way to describe it is that, and this is one of the things that I use with this woman with the cat phobia. Now, what I did with her was I wanted to make sure that I got it, right? So I did everything that I knew how to do. I was like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, so that at the end of it, I mean, this is the first time I ever worked with a phobia. you know, and it worked. So, I mean, I'm sure it was a combination of the various different things that I did that added up to the,
I'm surprised they didn't undo each other.
I mean, no, I mean, it was everything seemed in unison, because what it is it's like just you're putting in positive imagery, positive thoughts. I basically changed her thoughts from, she kept going back to this thought she had when a cat jumped on her shoulders and surprised her. And I basically changed and rewired that, so to speak, so that she wasn't going back to that memory anymore.
Now how?
By taking that thought, that initial image, and connecting it to another one, which is one of the things that the NLP techniques teach you how to do, which is basically like this.